Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is going to be a little different. Usually on this podcast, I'm joined by changemakers from around the world, people who are doing incredible work in their communities, their countries, and all around the world. But today, it's just me and my mic in my family home in Evergreen, Colorado. And this episode is being released on New Year's Eve, so I wanted to take a moment to pause and to reflect and to share some of my own learnings from 2025 and my hopes for 2026. So if you were here for an interview with an incredible changemaker, check out my past episodes or tune in next week. And I'm sorry, I guess, but if you'd like to stick around, please do. The theme of today's episode is change comes through community. 2025 has been a year full of growth, challenges, uncertainty, and hope for me, and for so many others as well, I'm sure. So I want to talk about what this year has taught me about creating change, holding on to hope, and why none of this work happens alone. So let's get into it. I want to first start off by talking about my word for 2025, which is hope. I entered the year feeling deep frustration about the political situation in my home country, the US, and also facing increasing concerns about the political direction that the UK, where I currently live, I'm getting really, really nervous about where the UK is going as well. So I think these frustrations and these concerns really left me in kind of a dark starting point in 2025, where I was feeling lots of nerves about the future of democracy, honestly. And I think that I've talked a lot about these feelings on the Political Dispatch, which is another podcast that I co-host with my good friends Sid and Tom. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Political Dispatch later in this episode. But I think that we all started off the year feeling like we needed to do more and feeling frustrated and also a bit hopeless, which I think is a tough place to be. But I had a couple realizations early on in the year, and now I think being able to reflect on those moments, I feel so much better about them. But I couldn't carry all of that weight alone. I think that was the first thing. As we're going to be talking about a lot in this episode, community is incredibly important for making change and keeping up the fight. And I needed to realize that, making huge systemic changes is not on my shoulders. And there's so many people who are doing incredible work around me and who are really trying to change the world every single day. And of course, I have the privilege of hosting this podcast where I get to talk with so many of them. So that was an incredible reminder because I get to talk with inspiring people all the time. But yeah, no one's doing this alone. And I certainly realized that early this year. And I think the only way forward from a lot of those feelings was choosing hope. And I think that can be a really difficult thing, to choose hope every day. But that is the only way forward. We have to choose hope. We have to be hopeful. We have to have that positivity and keep up the light. And I think that that's really, really hard. But for me, it's taking small actions towards the future that I want to see. So having that hope and then pairing it with small actions, because I think hope isn't necessarily enough all the time. Just having hope for the future with no action, for me, that feels a bit unproductive. But taking small actions combined with that hope, that was a big realization for me. It's pairing those two together, having hope, having a sense of the world that you want to create, and then taking those actions every day to create that world. The next thing that I want to talk about, because that was a perfect segue, but a little bit about those small actions that can lead to real change. I talk a lot about this on this podcast with a lot of my guests, but change doesn't always look like big, dramatic, crazy moments. Sometimes it's recording an episode like I'm doing right now. Sometimes it's having a conversation with someone who you maybe disagree with politically, or, maybe having a conversation with someone who comes from a different background than you do. All of these things can be ways of making change. It's, helping someone find their voice. It's sending an email. It's supporting someone through a difficult time in their life. All of these things. And even though, some of these might be bigger, some of these might be smaller, all of these are ways that you can make change. It's these small actions that you can do every day in some capacity that lead to bigger scale change. And I think the biggest thing that I've had to realize is that oftentimes it's showing up for people, even when it feels exhausting. I often talk about burnout a lot on this podcast with my guests as well, but I think sometimes there's something to be said for when other people are feeling exhausted or burnt out, and you might also be feeling that way. sometimes it needs to be you who pushes through that and supports them through that moment. Because maybe you do have a little bit more gas in the tank than they do. So maybe you can expend that energy that they just don't have. And maybe your little bit of energy going towards them and encouraging them to feel better and have hope, maybe that will reignite their spark. So I think sometimes, even if you're exhausted and even if it's a bad day, it's still continuing to show up and do the work and do these small, consistent actions. These small acts for me became my way of fighting the good fight. Do a little bit every day to make the world a better place, whether that's for one person, whether that's for your community, maybe even your country. If you're doing national wide-scale stuff, maybe the world. But it's just showing up, whatever makes sense for you that day. Small, consistent actions. For me, a very big transition in my life happened when I went full-time with Be the Change Media Network, which is the network that houses Be the Change podcast. And as I'm recording this, we have 19 other podcasts. And I officially went full-time this year with Be the Change. And I've been working on this podcast for about 5.5 years. So being able to work full-time on this podcast, of course, is a part of my job. But more widely, we're working on empowering young people and empowering people from underrepresented backgrounds to share their stories, to create content, to make the media landscape a more ethical and safe place for young people, for future generations. And I'm so passionate about this work. I hope that you can hear it as you're listening to this episode. But for me, going full-time means that I have been able to support so many more young creators to create their own blogs, their own podcasts, their own short-form video series, longer-form video series. And I get to create so much space for underrepresented stories because I have so much more time to do it. And I think this is such a passion of mine, this storytelling aspect of my job. I get to devote so much more time to crafting and finding really important stories that I want to share, which has been such a joy. And I think above all, the most fulfilling and the most exciting part of this work is helping people in my network, in my community, share what they care about the most. I've talked about it on this podcast before, but my favorite part of doing podcast interviews is when I ask a question that makes my guest light up. I think once you ask a question that people are really passionate about and they want to talk about, you just see that spark in them. I've been able to see that spark in all of the members of Be the Change Media Network that I've been able to work with. And that's what brings me so much joy, is supporting people to share what lights them up. I think that that's been wonderful for me, and I cannot wait to do even more of that in the new year. This work really gave me so much more hope. So I'm going back to that word of 2025. I think being able to share these moments with my team and the creators as part of the network, it's given me so much hope for the future. And I think, I'm inspired by my team every day. So going full time and being able to devote more time to that team has been such a wonderful, hopeful part of this year for me. And I think as I'm talking about my team, I have to talk about community. Community for me is the backbone of everything. And this is going to be my word and my guiding focus, I think, for 2026. Nothing can be done without community. It's so much more difficult to make change in isolation. Change cannot be made by one individual. It takes a community around that person. It takes the power of so many people together to be able to create change. So for me, I wanted to shout out a couple members of my community who have inspired me for years for some of them. And for some of them, it's a relatively new source of inspiration. But I first want to say, my dad inspires me every day. He's always a phone call away, even though we're thousands of miles apart. And my dad is constantly reminding me to keep fighting the good fight. And both of my parents are teachers. And so they really shaped what I believe about education and about how to make change, because my parents show up to work every day and they inspire the next generation of young people, which I think is an incredible way to make change. And I hope that I can connect with and inspire even half the people that my parents have. But both of my parents inspire me all the time. And I think, they're reminders to keep fighting the good fight, keep taking those small, consistent actions every day. And I'm so proud of the work that they both do. And I'm also really proud of the episodes that my dad joined me on. So he came on an episode of Be the Change podcast following the shooting that took place at Evergreen High School in September, which was a very unfortunate circumstance for him to join me under. But we had a wonderful conversation about hope and about the future of the U.S. And I'm so grateful that he joined me for that. And it was a very vulnerable and uplifting episode. So if you haven't checked that out, I will link that in the description because it was a wonderful one. And the other episode that my dad joined me for was with Tom and Sid on the Political Dispatch, which is the other podcast that I co-host. We loved that episode because my dad is a teacher. He teaches government and history, and we all joked that it felt like we were in the classroom listening to him because he was just so hopeful and so filled with wisdom. And it was just wonderful to be able to share some of his perspectives on the future of the US, particularly at the beginning of 2025. So yeah, I will also link that episode. If you haven't listened to that episode of the Political Dispatch, please listen to it. It is a wonderful episode, and I really enjoyed making it. So my dad and my mom, they are the backbone of a lot of the work that I do and the inspiration. So grateful for them and that they're a part of my community. My brother and sister as well. Just have to shout out my family. Families can often be such a wonderful source of community, but also community can be made up of the people that you find along the way. And so that's who I also want to shout out. The Be the Change Media Network creators, especially Tom, Troy, Eden, Sid, Skylar, Patty, Lubelli. Those are the first ones that come to mind, but we have tons, and I'm so proud of all of them, and I'm so grateful for this community that we're building together. It is incredible that we have created a group of people who are passionate about tons of different topics, but can come together to support one another and to share in creating this community for the rest of us. I think that's what's so inspiring about Be the Change Media Network is it really is a collective where it feels like we all have a say in a lot of the big decisions that are being made. And so I think their commitment, the commitment of all of the creators, is something that inspires me daily. And I certainly wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing without them. So I'm so grateful for all of them, the community that we're all building together. I think that it's so inspiring, and it's definitely what keeps me motivated and keeps me driving forward. The Be the Change Media Network creators, I'm so grateful for them. And I also just wanted to shout out, I think it's really difficult. This is something that I think change makers often neglect to talk about sometimes in their personal lives, because a lot of times when, activists and advocates and change makers of different sorts, we're doing this work all the time, and it can feel kind of all consuming sometimes. Like I think I've been in stages of my life where even the past, few months, it feels like all I'm doing is really working, and that does fulfill me. I think I'm so grateful for this work, and I can see so much change being made. So I'm not complaining by any means. I love my work. But I think sometimes we forget to nurture ourselves and our relationships. So I also want to give a big shout out to my best friends who are all around the world. And I think, sometimes we don't value those relationships enough when it feels like we're in this constant cycle of working and then trying to rest and then working and trying to rest. Sometimes, we forget to send that text, or we forget to send the voice memo or give them a quick call. I wanted to shout them out because I think, of course, family and your coworkers and your work community, but I think also those personal relationships and the community that you've grown along the way and the people that you've come to love, even if they might not be directly involved in my work or my change making, or maybe they're doing different things in their lives, they are incredible supporters and they're an amazing outlet. And it's really important, I think, for change makers, activists, advocates, whatever you are, to have that outlet, to have those people who might be a little bit more detached from the work that you're doing, because they can be kind of a sounding board sometimes, and they can be a bit of an escape sometimes when you might be feeling some anxiety around the work that you do. So huge shout out to my friends. I'm so grateful for all of you. And I feel like sometimes I don't say that enough. So now it's on my podcast for the world to hear. So there it is. But thank you all. I love you all so much. That brings me to my hopes for 2026, because I did mention that my word for 2026 is community. And so I want to keep growing these communities and valuing them, because I think, like I said, change cannot come without community. Change work, this work that so many of us are doing to make change is deeply meaningful, but it can also be really draining. And, it feels, I was reflecting on this with my dad actually, and it feels like there's always another episode to record, or another post to share, or another email to send, or another meeting to attend. And that can feel really draining, because when it comes to trying to change systems, it does feel like there's really no end point in sight. We can keep working towards this and keep putting in hours, but it's going to be a long time until we reach those bigger goals. So rather than on these huge goals that I'm working towards, I'm trying to focus more on what keeps me going, what keeps me energized every day, and making sure that I'm valuing those things. in between all of the work, in between, posting another episode, another Instagram post, sending another email. My friends, my family, this community of incredible change makers and creators that I'm building, that's what keeps me going. So I think it's making sure that you keep them in your mind when you're doing this work. That's your fuel. That's my fuel, at least. I won't speak for you. But my hope for listeners, as we're kind of getting closer to the end of this episode, my hope for you is that 2026 is filled with community. It's filled with people who bring you joy and who inspire you and who encourage you to take rest when you need it, but who uplift you when you need to be pushed a little bit more. I think that there's always that balance to strike, but my hope is that you find that community of people who support you however you need to be supported. And if you're still searching for that community, and if this has really resonated with you, come join us at Be the Change Media Network. We are always looking for people to come in and, start a new project with us, especially as the new year gets started. It's time for new things for a lot of people. So if you're searching for that community, we have a great one at Be the Change Media Network. And I will also share information about getting involved in the description of this episode if you would like to check it out. But yeah, had to throw in a little plug for the network there. Got to put it in somewhere. So thank you all so much for listening to this reflection episode. It is a very different style of episode than I usually do. So thank you so much for listening. If you're still listening to this point, I really appreciate it. I know I probably rambled a bit, so thank you for hanging in there with me. And I just want to reiterate as we close out 2025, my biggest takeaway is change doesn't happen alone. It happens through community. It's the people who challenge us, who support us, who inspire us, and who remind us why we got started with this work. It's the village that holds us up and supports us when the work feels heavy and the future feels uncertain, which it often does. My wish for all of you in 2026 is that you are surrounded by community and family and friends. And if you're still looking for your community, I hope you'll find a home with us at Be the Change Media Network. I truly think that we're building something very special. So if any of this has resonated with you, please let me know. I'd love to hop on a call and share a little bit more about what we're building with you. Thank you so much for listening this year and for supporting Be the Change podcast and for being part of this wider Be the Change Media Network journey with me. If you ever want to reach out, you can find me at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be the Change Media Network or at lilymott3. Until next time, be the change you wish to see in the world. I'll see you in 2026. Bye, everyone.